Hi, we're here with Jennifer Forbes, Labour's candidate for the Truro and Falmouth constituency. Hi Jen.
Hello.
So what's your key policy in this election?
Our Green Industrial Revolution policy is my key message. Climate change, I think, is the biggest issue, so that's the most important policy we have, I think.
And your predecessor, Jane Kirkham, narrowed the Conservative majority here by thousands of votes. What are you doing to maintain that momentum?
Having been a candidate for nearly 2 years, I think it's been useful over that time to build up on the momentum that we had before, and our policies just keep getting better and better, so I think our vote share is growing.
And Labour's plan is to negotiate a deal within 3 months, hold a second referendum within 6 months. That's a long time given that Brexit has already been going on for years. What would you say to voters who would just want Brexit over and actually see the Lib Dems and think that's a shorter timetable?
Yeah, I can completely understand people's frustration, and I think there's a simplistic appeal to the vote position, but I think it masks the fact that it may potentially cause more problems because it's such a heated conversation around Brexit. I don't think it would go away if we revoke, and I also don't think that would happen. So I think our policy is honest and upfront and doable, and we have to have that sensible conversation, give people a choice between a realistic Brexit deal that could get through Parliament and then honest campaigning about what that means so people can make a good decision.
And it's a very tight timetable. Is it actually doable?
Well, Labour have actually been in conversation with the EU all along. We've been having meetings. They're constantly sending a delegation over, and they've already agreed in principle to all of the things we've said, which makes sense because what we're actually talking about is close regulatory alignment. So it's in their interest. So I think it's completely possible for us to get that deal and then be able to put it back in the timescale.
But you say Labour has sent delegations. Labour have shifted their Brexit policy from the 2017 general election to the 2019. You supported that 2017 one. Do you feel like you and Labour have changed too much for this one?
I don't think we have really changed our position. I think the 6 tests set out clearly a criteria for a Brexit deal that we could agree to, which was as close as possible relationship to maintain all of the benefits we've had from the EU relationship over the years. And I think that as we've gone through, we've consistently opposed anything that fell away from that. And it's shown some of the problems with Brexit as we've done so. So now we're saying our deal would meet that criteria, but we need to put it back to people, which I think is the most democratic way to have approached this in the first place, personally.
And you're going to put it back to the people. Jeremy Corbyn has said he'll be neutral on that. What stance will you take?
I want to be as clear as possible about the benefits or not of whatever the deal is, because I feel like the problem at the moment has been the lack of honesty. I can completely agree there are plenty of good reasons to not like the EU. It's not a perfect institution and people might have very strongly held beliefs about why they don't want to be a member, but there was so much disinformation around last time. So I want to wait and see what that deal is and be crystal clear about what that means for people. I did vote to remain last time and I've yet to see a deal that would appeal to me more, but I think I need to wait to see it to be able to explain that to people.
So you would support Remain in that, or you would wait to see Labour's deal? Because Labour's deal is presumably going to be within those 6 red lines.
Yeah, I mean, I'm probably more inclined to Remain. I do just find it really hard to say it until I can actually see exactly what it means. We can see all of those details because there's so much in the fine print, isn't there? That, like, with the previous deal, things that haven't, I know they've been talked about, say, around workers' rights, but I think that kind of the depth of explanation about what that actually means for people is really important. Like to move workers' rights from a legal document to a political declaration, when I can already see how easy it is for people to be treated badly at work. I could never agree to something like that. So when we see exactly what that relationship looks like, I think we can have a better conversation about what would this mean going forward, because at the moment it's still very unclear where the benefits from leaving come from.
And so say you become an MP and Labour wins the majority and you campaign for Remain in that referendum and Leave won, would you then support that deal and vote through that deal?
Oh, that's a good question. I mean, Labour's policy is that we would accept whatever the outcome of the next referendum is, so I think I would be, obliged to do that. That's our policy platform. So yeah, we'll just have to wait and see what happens with the vote.
And I want to move on to environment because you're a passionate environmental activist. What are the key changes that Labour will put forward in Cornwall specifically?
Gosh, there are lots. So we need to massively improve public transport. Obviously that's an area of high emissions. The recent announcements to invest in the rail line to make that more feasible, cutting rail fares will move a lot of people off the roads. Active forms of transport, so we can integrate and improve bus journeys with the rail network and enable more people to use bikes and take those on buses. So things like that will really revolutionise the way people get around. In Cornwall we have a very high level of old housing stock, so that programme of insulation will create jobs, reduce bills, save lots of energy, community owned energy schemes. There are on and offshore wind farms. In Falmouth docks, we're proposing to expand the docks there to enable that to become a world leader in floating wind technology. So it's another great way of improving our local economy and technology at the same time.
And in the Labour 2019 Party Conference, you said 2030 would be your net zero emission target. That's now moved to within the 2030s. That isn't aligning with Cornwall Council's target of 2030. Is there any way it could be more ambitious?
I think that the 30 by 30 document that we set out gives a lot of very credible, detailed ideas for how we intend to get there. I think there was a little bit of concern that some of the technology that you need potentially to make this happen by 2030 doesn't exist at the moment. We're banking on we will get there, and I think it's really important to have that intention for 2030 because it's crucial for me and the planet that we get there. I understand people being concerned about banking on something that doesn't yet exist, but I think having that intention to make it happen will mean we'll do it. So for me, the intention is the most important thing, and then we'll find ways to back it up with technology.
Yeah.
But I can understand why they had to be careful about putting in place an agreement before we've got that technology.
And obviously a huge change like that to infrastructure would really impact on businesses. How are you going to support businesses through that?
So I see this as a real opportunity. That's why we're calling it a green industrial revolution, because it is a wide-scale change, a massive transformation. So we can make a fair and just society as we do so, and businesses will need support. But we're talking about £250 billion of investment, which we'll be able to use, especially for like small businesses in Cornwall. We can look at what our local needs are. We're going to have investment bodies, so set up regionally and for Cornwall, so we can really help to target where that investment is necessary to transform our economy.
So the Lib Dems are looking at a lot of supply chains. Are you going to be focusing on that sort of outside of the UK carbon emissions?
Oh yeah, that's included in the manifesto. I mean, I think it's just disgusting that we've basically taken away the responsibility as things currently stand. We're not looking at how much our consumption in the UK is actually, is making emissions in other parts of the world. So it's essential that all of those things are costed into our own emissions here, and we're measuring that and improving that elsewhere as well.
And you talk about the Labour manifesto and its pledges to environmental policies. Why is it better than the Green manifestos? Arguably they're more focused on the environment.
I think it really comes down to a lot of detail, and I mean maybe that's just an advantage that a larger party has over a smaller party, that we've been able to spend a lot of time really thinking through where we're going to get there. So I think that detail makes a difference. For me personally,
what specific detail? Sorry.
Oh well, I couldn't detail. I couldn't detail. It's a 187-page document.
What is the one key policy Labour has over the Greens in environmental policies?
My specific area of concern there is about how we take workers with us, and this is a thing that comes up quite often between Labour and the Greens. I love the Greens; they've got fantastic policies, but for me, this is rooted in understanding workers and their fears as a trade unionist. I often hear the Greens talk about the trade unions as a problem, because they represent a large body of workers that are concerned. So with the Labour conference, getting the policy for a Green New Deal through, it involved a lot of negotiation with the unions. Now I think that's really important. It's actually where my history as a Green activist comes from, through the trade union movement. So I understand how difficult those negotiations are, but they're essential because we need to take people with us. We can't leave communities behind. So for me, the strength of our position is that we are the people that will negotiate with the unions, make those jobs and the transitions possible, without the ideas that you can just tax poorer people to get them to change their behaviours. People, if they don't have solutions put in front of them to make it easy, you can't expect people living in poverty to be able to make that choice.
And moving on to the NHS, Labour has been campaigning heavily on the NHS, with Jeremy Corbyn revealing the unredacted documents. Labour is pledging to spend a lot more on the NHS. That would push general spending up to 80 billion by 2023 to 2024. The IFS has pointed out that would create a tax burden not seen since the Second World War. Is that reasonable to put on the general public?
Well, it's not the general public, is it? For a start off, we're only asking for the NHS specifically. Nobody earning under £80,000 a year is going to pay any more tax, and even then it's a sliding scale. But it's a wider part of our policy. Our taxation revenue raising will come from only the people that can genuinely afford to pay. And in comparison to other Western European democracies, other model industrialised nations, it's very moderate spending proposal. So it is an increase for the UK, but we've got severely underfunded public services. That's why we need that increase.
But you mentioned the 80,000. The IFS has said that that accounts for less than a tenth of additional revenue that Labour needs to raise. Where is the rest going to come from?
There are loads of great ways we can raise money, from things like the financial transaction tax, which is betting short trades on the stock market. There's no productive use in the economy, it's just gambling, and that has negative effects on our economy. You can raise £6.6 billion from that. As a conservative estimate, and accounting for behavioural change, when I've looked into the detail of some of these things, actually we're much more likely to raise a lot more. So we've tried to show in a very reasonable way, this is the minimum you could expect to raise, but actually things like that will have beneficial effects on the economy. People won't be moving. There's a lot of scare stories about capital flight. I think that's massively overestimated. Some of the areas we're going to raise money, like on the tech giants, from Facebook, Amazon and Google. America actually runs that model of taxation, which is based on the volume of trade rather than the amount they're declaring. So if America can do it, I don't see why we can't.
And for Cornwall specifically, it has some quite unique issues, sort of with rural hospitals and mental health. What is Labour going to be doing to help those types of institutions?
Yeah, so the ring fencing money for mental health is really important, and increased investment for mental health. I mean, on a wider picture on mental health, I think a lot of the reasons why we've got such a mental health epidemic is because of the way wider society is constructed at the moment. There are plenty of ways that government can take responsibility for the fact that we've made life much harder than it needs to be for so many people, and everything impacts through, from the world of work, education, childcare. All of these things build in stresses. So there's a lot of detail in changing society that will ease burdens, but obviously treatment is really important and underfunded at the moment. So on mental health, I think that it's immediate funding and then longer term kind of issues with the countries that spend more on public services at the moment, like as they do in much of Europe, they report much happier society. So I think that's our goal to move towards.
And with rural hospitals and ones like Truro, they're in huge danger at the moment. How is Labour going to support those struggling hospitals, particularly through the winter months?
Yeah, I mean, we've suffered from chronic underfunding in Cornwall. The sneaking privatisation also, I think, takes money out and increases stresses in the hospital. But I think that our pledge to give the hospital, the NHS in general, the funding the experts say it needs. I mean, I've just got faith in those experts looking at where the shortfalls are and saying that's what we need to put in. And then obviously we'll need to work with the local hospitals in Cornwall to see if there are any ways we can further assist them, because we've had consistent reports from the CQC that Royal Cornwall Hospital doesn't perform particularly well, and it doesn't learn from its mistakes, and it has been improving slowly, and I'm sure the funding has created a lot of problems there, but I feel that too much pressure has been put on the staff for a long time, and people that I speak to that work at the hospital have really struggled. I think so many staff have left, and the people that are left behind are really carrying too much weight on their shoulders, so we really need to support them and bring in more.
And the Conservatives are saying that they will bring in more nurses. Why should people vote for you for the NHS rather than the Conservatives?
Well, I think that our policies have been honest and upfront about that funding and about bringing in new staff. Labour have always been the party for the NHS. It's been something I've campaigned on for a long time, particularly around the Health and Social Care Act. I think that the pledge to reverse that shows Labour has learnt from its mistakes in the past. We should never have introduced privatisation. It was a tiny amount when Labour brought it in. It was a mistake. So was PFI. Now we're saying we're going to repeal the Tory and Lib Dem Privatisation Act, and that will secure the NHS's future. And I think at the moment when so many people are worried about privatisation, that's essential.
And I want to move on to education. Labour is planning to scrap tuition fees and bring back maintenance loans. Why are you doing that?
Because education is a social good. It benefits everybody, not just the people that are doing it. I think that the very best that we have in the world could exist anywhere, and people are excluded from an education because they can't afford it. They don't feel They might not have the confidence in themselves to get themselves into that kind of debt. We've also narrowed down educational opportunities for people. We don't have enough high quality apprenticeships, vocational training to transform our economy to the future. We need to think about new green jobs, and those climate apprenticeships will help that. If we aren't funding the education to enable that to happen, how could we transition as well?
University fees were originally introduced by Labour to remove the tax burden from the middle class paying for the wealthy elite to go to university. Would it not be better then to means test university fees?
I mean, often with means testing, it costs more money than it saves as a general rule of thumb. And I think that this is one of the great reasons I love our Labour Party manifesto. It is actually about universal benefits for everybody, to bring society up together. At the moment, society is rigged towards benefiting the privileged few, and we're talking like the top 3%. We're talking about lifting everybody up, and universal benefits also helps with like community feel.
But you are not still supporting that wealthy elite by getting the taxpayer to pay for university, because more rich children go to university.
Well, I think it will enable children from a poorer background to feel more confident in going to university. I've seen conflicting stories about whether or not it's had an impact, but I believe, I mean, certainly from my own experience, the fees put me off going to a brick university, and I know plenty of other people that had that experience. I mean, the wealthy elite at the moment can afford to send their children to university anyway, can't they? And I think it actually disadvantages more people from lower socio-economic backgrounds.
And I just want to move on to political tone at the moment. So it's recently gone fairly downhill, and MPs are facing more threats. Labour has been repeatedly criticised by the Labour Jewish movement. How do you see the political tone recovering? How would you personally improve it?
I think at the moment things are quite bad. It's really upsetting because ordinary voters find it really difficult to know who they can trust, because there are so many. It doesn't seem that many people hold much value to the truth in terms of campaigning, in terms of literature, in terms of promises, and how can we really improve society if nobody knows who to believe? So I make sure that I'm as honest as I always can be, and I think I sometimes shock people by just giving a very straight answer when they're not expecting it, and I hope that means that people will just come to realise that I am somebody that just speaks my mind. I come from a quite different background to the average politician, and my experience means that I just want to change things for my community. I have no interest really in going to London or working in Westminster. I just want to see changes for people in Cornwall.
And in what way do you want to see the political tone change? So do you think there are certain people we need to criticise for political tone?
I mean, obviously, people like Boris Johnson should take a lot of responsibility for the words that he uses when they have had a direct impact in rises in hate crime, when he talks about people wearing their religious garments, and then that means people get attacked in the streets. I think that's disgusting. But equally, the Lib Dems make claims to be against fake news, and then they're constantly putting it out in their literature, and they, you know, that all contributes to a climate where people are fearful, they're angry, and they're distrustful, and that isn't good for anybody. And
do you think Labour should take some responsibility as well for that tone? You criticise the Conservatives and the Liberal Democrats.
Yeah, well, so if you've got an example of where Labour people have done that, then absolutely. I mean, the one thing that I could always say about Jeremy Corbyn is it doesn't matter what kind of personal abuse he takes personally, he never retaliates. And he encourages everybody to act like that. So if people aren't, then I would like to know about it. But certainly from my point of view, I think it's really important to try not to take things personally, even if people are directing their anger at me, and to try to sort of rise above it and understand where their frustration is coming from.
Thank you, Jen.
Okay.